A group of influential Iguarians leaders, each with a large following, came together to form what they called the Iguarians Coalition. The idea was simple. By uniting under one banner, they could present a more organized and powerful front in their advocacy for Paul Igwe. The coalition claimed that this would streamline efforts, prevent duplication of resources, and give the movement more clout in the political arena. However, the coalition also came with a price, literally. They announced that any group wishing to join the coalition would have to pay a membership fee of 500,000 mugra. The money, they argued, was necessary to fund the coalition's operations, including organizing events, creating promotional materials, and running social media campaigns. They also made it clear that any Iguarian group that did not join the coalition would not be recognized as an official part of the movement. The announcement sparked immediate controversy. While some groups were willing to pay the fee, seeing it as a necessary investment in the movement's success, others were outraged. They argued that the very essence of the Iguarians was that it was a people-powered movement, not beholden to any centralized authority or fees. To them, the coalition's demands represented everything they were fighting against: elitism, exclusion, and the monetization of political activism. Internal strife and backlash. One of the most vocal opponents of the coalition was the leader of a prominent Iguarian group called Niger Must Be Free, led by Prince Wankoko. Wankoko, who had been one of the early adopters of the Iguarian cause, had poured his own money into creating a free mobile app that disseminated information about Paul Igwe's campaign, organized events, and kept supporters informed about upcoming activities. He saw the coalition's demands as a betrayal of the movement's principles. "I didn't join this movement to pay my way in," Wankoko said during a fiery Twitter Space debate. "We're here because we believe in Paul Igwe and the change he represents. Now you want to charge us 500,000 mugra just to be recognized? That's not the Iguarian spirit, that's extortion." The response from the coalition was swift and brutal. They banded together to discredit Wankoko, launching a coordinated attack on Twitter and other social media platforms. Coalition members accused him of being a mole for Chief Bisola Elenian, the powerful Yorubawa politician who had long been an enemy of the Iguarians. "He's nothing but an Elenian stooge," tweeted one prominent coalition member at Igwe for Change. "He's trying to divide us from within because he can't stand to see the Iguarians united. Don't be fooled by his fake Niger Must Be Free rhetoric. He's just another pawn in the Godfather's game." The attacks quickly gained momentum, with coalition supporters piling on. They claimed that Wankoko's refusal to join the coalition was proof that he was working against the movement, and they called on all Iguarians to reject his mobile app, accusing it of illegally mining user data. "Don't download the app," warned at True Iguarian. "It's been compromised. Wankoko is using it to steal your data and sell it to the highest bidder. Report it to Google and protect yourselves." The smear campaign was devastatingly effective. Within days, the app, which had been gaining popularity among Iguarians, was inundated with complaints. Over 100,000 reports were filed with Google, claiming the app was unsafe. Despite there being no evidence to support these claims, the sheer volume of complaints forced Google to shut it down, effectively silencing one of the movement's most valuable tools. Feeling betrayed and isolated, Prince Wankoko took his grievances directly to Paul Igwe. In an open letter posted on social media, Wankoko pleaded with the Iguarian leader to intervene. "Dear Paul," the letter began, "I have dedicated my time, resources, and passion to supporting your candidacy because I believe in the change you represent. But now, I find myself under attack, not from our common enemies, but from within our own ranks. The Iguarians coalition has sought to extort money from us, and when we refused, they have done everything in their power to destroy our efforts. I beg you, as the leader of this movement, to step in and restore order. We cannot allow greed and ambition to tear us apart." The letter struck a chord with many within the movement, who were disturbed by the internal strife and the heavy-handed tactics of the coalition. However, to their dismay, Paul Igwe and his campaign team chose to remain silent. Publicly, they maintained an air of neutrality, refusing to take sides in what they portrayed as a minor internal disagreement. In private, however, the campaign team debated the issue extensively. Some advisors argued that Igwe should distance himself from the coalition's tactics to avoid alienating his grassroots base. Others insisted that staying out of the fray was the safest course of action, as intervening might create deeper rifts within the movement. Ultimately, Paul Igwe decided not to involve himself directly. He hoped that by staying above the conflict, he could avoid alienating any faction within the movement. But this decision only served to deepen the resentment among those who felt victimized by the coalition. The Agadongo People's Party and Chief Elenian supporters wasted no time in exploiting the growing divisions within the Iguarians. They launched a campaign of their own, gleefully pointing to the internal strife as evidence that the Iguarians were not the united, principled movement they claimed to be. They talk about change and justice, but look at them. They're already tearing each other apart over money, sneered a commentator on CVT TV during a segment titled, "The True Face of the Iguarians." These so-called reformers are just like the rest, added another panelist. They're driven by greed and power, and they're no different from the elites they claim to oppose. This proves what we've been saying all along. Most of these Iguarians are in it for the money, not for Mugaland. The segment was widely shared, and the narrative began to take hold among the broader population. The Iguarians, who had once been seen as a beacon of hope and integrity, were now being painted as just another group of opportunists, driven by self-interest rather than a genuine desire for change. The fallout from the conflict was severe. The movement, which had prided itself on its inclusivity and grassroots nature, was now fractured. Many smaller Iguarian groups, disillusioned by the coalition's actions and Paul Igwe's refusal to intervene, began to splinter off, choosing to continue their advocacy independently. The Naija Must Be Free group, despite the attacks, continued its work, but without the app and with a significantly reduced online presence. For the first time since its inception, the Iguarian movement seemed vulnerable, not because of external threats, but because of internal discord. The ruling elites, watching from the sidelines, could hardly contain their glee. The once unified front of the Iguarians was now riddled with cracks, and those cracks were growing wider by the day. But even as the movement stumbled, the core of its supporters remained committed. They knew that the fight for Mugaland's future was far from over, and that despite the setbacks, the Iguarians still had a crucial role to play in the upcoming elections. The question was whether they could overcome their internal divisions in time to make a difference. As the movement regrouped, one thing became clear: the road to change was going to be far more difficult and treacherous than anyone had anticipated. The Iguarians had drawn blood, but now, they had to figure out how to heal their own wounds before they could hope to heal the nation. Episode 10, The Children of Anger Face Off with the Grandfather of Violence. The Iguarian movement had become a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of the unyielding determination of a new generation to reshape Mugaland. Their aggressive stance on social media and their refusal to compromise had won them both admiration and resentment. Among those who had grown increasingly critical of their methods was Professor Jade Oripo, a Nobel laureate and once a revered fighter against oppression. Professor Oripo had long been celebrated for his fearless advocacy for justice. In his youth, he had been a radical, a firebrand, who had taken extreme measures to confront tyranny. His legendary status in Mugaland's history was built on his audacity to stand up to power, even when it meant risking his life. However, as the Iguarians grew more assertive in their demands for change, Oripo found himself at odds with the very people who had once looked up to him. The professor's critique, it began with a tweet that sent shockwaves through the Iguarian community. Professor Oripo, known for his eloquent and thoughtful commentary, took to Twitter to express his disapproval of the Iguarians' methods. The Iguarians have become a social media Gestapo, a mob of children of anger who destroy without thinking, he wrote. Their methods, though born out of a desire for change, are dangerous and reckless. They have lost sight of the principles they claim to uphold. For many within the movement, this critique felt like a betrayal. Professor Oripo, a man whose own history was steeped in radical activism, was now condemning them for using the very tactics he had once employed. The Iguarians, however, were not ones to back down from a fight, especially not when they believed they were in the right. Exposing the grandfather's past. It didn't take long for the Iguarians to dig into Professor Oripo's past, unearthing the very stories that had made him a legend. They highlighted the fact that in his youth, Oripo had been far more than just a writer and intellectual. He had been a revolutionary. Years ago, in a bold and dangerous move, a young Jade Oripo had stormed a broadcasting station at gunpoint. Furious over what he believed was a rigged election, he had taken the broadcasters hostage, forcing them to announce the correct election results that had been suppressed by the government. For this act, Oropo was declared a fugitive, and he had to flee to the southeastern region of Mugaland, seeking refuge among the Okorobians, a tribe he now looked upon with disdain. But that wasn't all. During his time on university campuses, Oropo had founded a secret society known as the Road Eagles. This group was dedicated to fighting oppression in all its forms, using whatever means necessary. Under Oropo's leadership, the Road Eagles became notorious for their violent tactics. They burned down the houses of corrupt administrators, severely beat lecturers who exploited students, and instilled fear in anyone who dared to abuse their power. The very violence and anger that Oropo now condemned in the Iguarians had been his weapon of choice in his youth. The Iguarian response. The response from the Iguarians was swift and merciless. They took to Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms calling out Oropo for his hypocrisy. "You talk about children of anger, Professor?" tweeted at Igwa4Change. "Look in the mirror. You were the original child of anger, the one who taught us that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Don't forget, you were the one who stormed a broadcasting station with a gun. You were the one who started the Road Eagles. We're just following in your footsteps." The hashtag #grandfather of anger quickly began to trend, with Iguarians across the country sharing stories of Oropo's past and accusing him of abandoning the principles that had once defined him. In a heated Twitter space titled "The Children of Anger Face Off with Their Grandfather," Iguarian leaders and supporters confronted Oropo's legacy head-on. The debate was intense, with voices on both sides clashing over the interpretation of Oropo's past and its relevance to the current struggle. "Professor Oropo was a hero," began Kemi, one of the movement's most passionate voices. "But heroes can fall. He's forgotten what it means to fight for justice. The anger he once wielded like a sword has turned into bitterness. He should be proud of us for continuing the fight he started." Another participant, Tade, added, "The Road Eagles didn't back down when faced with injustice. They didn't play nice, and neither will we. If Professor Oropo wants to call us children of anger, he should remember that we are his children, following the path he laid out." The clash on Sunset Television. The clash between the Iguarians and Professor Oropo spilled over from social media to mainstream media. On Sunset Television, a special episode of their popular political talk show featured a fiery debate between Iguarian representatives and supporters of Professor Oropo. "The Iguarians are simply the new generation of fighters," argued Bolu Yahaya, representing the movement. "Professor Oropo should be celebrating us, not condemning us. We are doing what he once did, standing up to oppression in the only way the oppressors understand, without fear." On the other side, an older academic who had worked closely with Oropo defended the professor's stance. "There's a difference between fighting for justice and descending into chaos," he said. "What Oropo did in his youth was targeted and purposeful. What the Iguarians are doing now is reckless, and it risks tearing the fabric of our society apart." The discussion grew heated, with neither side willing to concede. The tension in the studio was palpable, and the debate was mirrored across the nation, with households, cafes, and offices buzzing with arguments about who was right. The old guard who preached caution and wisdom, or the new generation who demanded immediate and uncompromising action. The aftermath. The clash between the Iguarians and Professor Oropo marked a turning point in the movement's relationship with the older generation of activists. The debate had exposed the deep rift between those who had once fought for change and those who were now leading the charge. For the Iguarians, the fight with Oropo was not just about defending their methods, it was about asserting their right to define their own struggle, even if it meant challenging the very people who had inspired them. Professor Oropo, for his part, was deeply affected by the backlash. In a follow-up interview with The Observer, he reflected on the controversy. "I have always believed in the power of anger to fuel change," Oropo said, "but anger, unchecked, can also destroy. My concern for the Iguarians is that in their zeal, they may lose sight of the justice they seek. I fought with anger in my youth, yes, but I also learned the value of restraint. I only hope they do the same before it's too late." But the Iguarians were undeterred. For them, the clash with Professor Oropo had only reinforced their belief that their fight was necessary and that they were on the right side of history. They knew that their methods would continue to draw criticism, but they also knew that they could not afford to be anything less than relentless. As the dust settled, the Iguarians stood firm, ready to continue their battle for the soul of Mugaland, even if it meant facing off against the very icons who had once led the way. As the Iguarian movement grew in strength and numbers, Paul Igwe, the man at the center of it all, found himself walking a delicate tightrope. After decamping from his original political party, Igwe had joined the Workers' People's Party, a small but passionate party that had long championed the cause of the common people. However, the WPP had never seen anything like the Iguarians, a massive, vocal and self-funding group of supporters who were fiercely loyal to Igwe and relentless in their pursuit of a better Muguland. What should have been a natural alliance quickly turned into a tenuous and fragile relationship. The WPP, which had always struggled to gain a foothold on the national stage, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight thanks to Igwe's popularity and the Iguarians' fervent support. But rather than embrace this newfound energy, the party's leadership found themselves wary of the Iguarians, unsure of how to manage this powerful but unpredictable force. The Workers' People's Party had never had a leader with the national stature of Paul Igwe. For years, the party had languished on the fringes of Muguland's political scene, advocating for workers' rights and social justice but never truly breaking through to the mainstream. Igwe's arrival should have been a game-changer, but instead, it created anxiety within the party's ranks. The party's leaders, most of whom were old-school politicians who had built their careers on grassroots organizing and traditional political tactics, were unprepared for the digital dynamism that the Iguarians brought to the table. The party had never dealt with such a large, tech-savvy and vocal group of supporters, and their response was cautious, perhaps overly so. Instead of integrating the Iguarians into the party structure, the WPP kept them at arm's length. The party leadership saw the Iguarians not as allies but as a potential threat to their control. They feared that the movement's energy and loyalty to Igwe might eclipse the party itself, reducing the WPP to nothing more than a vehicle for Igwe's ambitions. At the same time, the party's leadership struggled to keep up with the rapid pace of the digital age. While the Iguarians were organizing Twitter spaces, launching viral hashtags, and creating powerful online campaigns, the WPP's responses were slow, clunky, and often out of touch. The disconnect between the tech-savvy Iguarians and the party's old-school leadership became increasingly apparent, and tensions began to rise. For the Iguarians, the WPP's reluctance to fully embrace them was frustrating. They had poured their time, energy and money into supporting Paul Igwe, and they saw the WPP's slow responses and cautious approach as a drag on their candidate's momentum. The Iguarians were used to moving fast, making decisions on the fly and taking bold actions. The WPP's old-fashioned ways felt like a ball and chain, holding them back from achieving their goals. "Why are we even bothering with them?" asked Kemi during a heated Twitter space discussion. "The party is stuck in the past. We're the future. Our loyalty is to Paul Igwe, not to a bunch of politicians who can't even figure out how to use Twitter." This sentiment was echoed by many within the movement. The Iguarians began to publicly criticize the WPP, calling out its leaders for being out of touch and out of date. They accused the party of being a hindrance to Igwe's campaign, rather than an asset. One particularly explosive incident occurred when the WPP issued a statement criticizing the Iguarians for their unruly behavior and calling for a more disciplined approach to political advocacy. The statement was met with immediate backlash. "Unruly? We're the ones doing the work," tweeted at Igwe warriors. "While they sit in their offices, we're out here fighting for change. If they can't keep up, maybe they should step aside." The conflict played out across social media, with Iguarians and WPP leaders trading barbs in a very public and very messy dispute. The WPP's attempts to assert control over the movement only fueled the Iguarians' anger, and soon the two sides were locked in a bitter struggle for dominance. As the conflict dragged on, a new and more troubling question began to emerge among the more cerebral and reflective members of the Iguarians. If Paul Igwe couldn't manage this conflict between his supporters and his party, how could he be expected to lead an entire nation? "I believe in Paul Igwe, but this isn't a good look," said Prince Wankoko in a Twitter space titled "Leadership in Crisis." Wankoko, who had already faced his own battles within the movement, was one of the few who dared to publicly question Igwe's leadership. He needs to step in and resolve this. If he can't, then maybe he's not the leader we thought he was. Others agreed, pointing out that Igwe's silence on the matter was damaging not only to the movement but to his credibility as a leader. The Iguarians had always prided themselves on their loyalty to Igwe, but now, for the first time, that loyalty was being tested. "Where is Igwe?" tweeted at Real Iguarian. "We're out here fighting for him and he's nowhere to be found. Leadership means stepping up when it matters. We need him to take control or we risk losing everything we've worked for." As the internal skirmishes between the Iguarians and the WPP escalated, The Agadongo People's Party and Chief Bisola Elenian supporters saw an opportunity to exploit the situation. They began circulating stories that painted the Iguerians as a disorganized and self-serving group, driven more by internal power struggles than by any real commitment to change. "See what we've been saying all along?" sneered a commentator on CVT TV during a segment titled, "The Iguerians' True Colors." They claim to be fighting for a better Mugaland, but look at them. They can't even work with their own party. This isn't a movement for change, it's a power grab by people who are only in it for themselves. The narrative gained traction, particularly among undecided voters who were already wary of the Iguerians' aggressive tactics. The conflict with the WPP was not just an internal issue, it was becoming a public relations disaster, threatening to undermine everything the movement had achieved. In the end, Paul Igwe chose not to intervene decisively in the conflict. Whether out of a desire to avoid alienating either side, or simply out of a reluctance to wade into the messy dynamics of the dispute, Igwe remained largely silent. His refusal to take a firm stance left many within the movement disillusioned. For the Iguerians, the lack of leadership was a bitter pill to swallow. They had dedicated themselves to Igwe, believing him to be the leader who could bring about real change. But as the conflict dragged on, it became increasingly clear that Igwe's hands-off approach was costing them dearly. The tension between the Iguerians and the Workers' People's Party never fully resolved. While the movement continued to push forward, the rift left scars that would not easily heal. And for the first time, doubts about Paul Igwe's ability to lead Mugulan began to take root within the very movement that had propelled him to the forefront of the nation's political landscape. As the elections loomed ever closer, the Iguerians faced the daunting challenge of keeping their movement intact while navigating the complex and often treacherous waters of party politics. The question on everyone's mind was whether they could overcome these internal divisions in time, or whether the very forces that had driven them to the brink of power would ultimately be their undoing.
Episode 12. Muguwood shakes as the Iguerians split the industry. The rise of the Iguerian movement had sparked a cultural and political revolution across Muguland. As the nation wrestled with questions of justice, equity, and the future of its democracy, the impact of the movement reverberated far beyond the traditional political sphere. One of the most significant and unexpected battlegrounds became Muguwood, the nation's vibrant film and music industry. Muguwood had always been more than just entertainment. It was a reflection of Muguland's soul, a mirror held up to society. But as the Iguerians clashed with the ruling elite, the industry found itself torn apart, with actors, directors, musicians, and producers forced to take sides in a growing class war that would define the nation's future. The Iguerian stars. Two of Muguwood's biggest stars, Femi Falomo and Amaka Bradshaw, became unlikely but passionate champions of the Iguerian cause. Femi, a charismatic and influential actor known for his powerful roles in dramas that tackled social issues, saw in the Iguerians the same spirit of resistance and change that had inspired his best performances. Amaka, a beloved actress and singer with a reputation for her advocacy on women's rights, was drawn to the movement's fierce independence and commitment to justice. Femi and Amaka became vocal supporters of Paul Igwe, using their platforms to amplify the Iguerians' message. Their involvement brought a new level of visibility to the movement, drawing in other artists who had previously remained on the sidelines. For them, supporting the Iguerians was more than just a political stance, it was a moral imperative. "I've played heroes on screen," Femi said during an interview on Sunset Television. "But this is real life. We're fighting for the soul of our country, and we can't sit this one out. The Iguerians are demanding the change we've all been waiting for. How can we not stand with them?" Amaka echoed his sentiments during a performance at a benefit concert for the movement. "We sing about freedom, we act out stories of justice, but now it's time to live those values. The Iguerians aren't just talking about change, they're making it happen, and we're going to stand with them every step of the way." Their passionate support galvanized the artistic community, leading to a wave of endorsements from other Muguwood stars, musicians, and even directors. The Iguerians were no longer just a political movement, they were becoming a cultural phenomenon. The counterattack. Chief Elenian's envelopes. Chief Bisola Elenian and his supporters, recognizing the influence of Muguwood, decided to strike back. They began distributing large envelopes of money to some of the industry's biggest names, urging them to publicly endorse Elenian and denounce the Iguarians. The offer was tempting: fame, fortune, and favor with one of the most powerful men in Muguland. Soon, several top-tier actors and musicians who had previously remained neutral or silent began to emerge as vocal supporters of Chief Elenian. These endorsements were plastered across billboards, social media, and television screens, presenting Elenian as the candidate of stability and tradition. One of the most prominent voices in Elenian's camp was Toke Isaac, a superstar actress known for her glamorous roles and larger-than-life persona. Toke Isaac, who had long been a darling of the Muguwood scene, took to the airwaves to declare her support for Chief Elenian. "I believe in continuity, in experience," Toke Isaac said during an interview on CVT-TV, a network known for its pro-Elenian stance. "Chief Elenian represents the values that have kept Muguland strong. We need a leader who understands the complexities of our nation, not a group of unruly activists who want to tear everything down." The endorsements from Muguwood's elite created a stark divide within the industry, with some artists aligning themselves with the establishment and others with the Iguarians. The split was more than just political. It was personal, as friendships and professional relationships were strained or broken. The Iguarians strike back. The Iguarians, true to form, did not take the endorsements of Elenian lying down. They saw the involvement of these Muguwood stars as a betrayal of the very ideals that the industry had often portrayed in its films and music: justice, equality, and the fight against oppression. On social media, the Iguarians launched a relentless campaign against the pro-Elenian artists, calling for boycotts of their movies and music. Hashtags like #boycott-the-sellouts and #no-to-oppression trended as Iguarians organized petitions against the artists who had taken Elenian's money. One of the most significant targets of this campaign was Toke Isaac. The Iguarians accused her of selling out for money and turning her back on the people who had made her a star. They took their campaign global, petitioning platforms like Amazon Prime Video and Netflix to remove her films, arguing that she was using her influence to support a corrupt regime. The pressure worked. Within weeks, Amazon Prime Video announced that it was pulling one of Toke Isaac's latest films from its platform, citing the overwhelming number of petitions it had received. The news sent shockwaves through Muguwood and was seen as a major victory for the Iguarians. The breakdown. The backlash against Toke Isaac reached a boiling point when she appeared on a live television interview, where she broke down in tears, describing the harassment she had endured from Iguarians. "I don't understand why they're doing this to me," she said, her voice trembling. "I've always supported the arts, supported our culture, but now, because I have a different opinion, they're trying to destroy my career, my life. This isn't the Muguland I know." The interview, meant to garner sympathy, only deepened the divide. While some viewers felt pity for Toke Isaac, others saw her tears as crocodile tears, an attempt to play the victim after choosing to align with the very forces of oppression the Iguarians were fighting against. On Twitter, the response was brutal. "She can cry all she wants," tweeted @IgweWarriors. "But we're not going to let her sell out our country for her own gain. If you stand with Elenian or the Agadongo Party, then you stand with corruption. Period." The fallout from the campaign against Toke Isaac and other pro-Elenian artists sent ripples through Muguwood. Some artists, fearing similar backlash, began to distance themselves from the political fray, while others doubled down on their support for Elenian, determined to stand their ground. A nation forced to choose sides. As the drama unfolded, it became clear that the upcoming election was not just about politics. It was a battle for the soul of Muguland. Muguwood, like every other sector of society, was being forced to choose sides, and the stakes had never been higher. The split within Muguwood mirrored the broader divisions within the country. On one side were those who believed in the status quo, who feared the chaos and uncertainty that the Iguarians might bring. On the other were those who saw the Iguarians as the only hope for true change, even if that change came with risks. For Paul Igwe and the Iguarians, the battle within Muguwood was both a blessing and a curse. The support from artists like Femi Falomo and Amaka Bradshaw gave the movement cultural credibility and a platform to reach millions. But the backlash for their stance against the pro-Elenian stars also showed the potential dangers of the Iguarians' uncompromising approach. As the election approached, the tension within Muguwood and within Muguland as a whole continued to escalate. The nation was on edge, and every tweet, every interview, every petition felt like a battle in a larger war for the future. The question on everyone's mind was simple but profound. When the dust settled, what kind of Muguland would be left standing?
They call us reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, 'cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't. They call us reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, 'cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't be tamed. For Muguland's freedom, our fire's inflamed. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lies. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. The streets are burning with the passion of the brave. No chains can hold us, no power can enslave. They say we're rebels, but we know we're right. Corruption crumbles when we unite. On social media, in the open streets, our voices thunder, refusing defeat. They throw us in cells, accuse us of treason, but we keep fighting, for we are the reason. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lights. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. We fight for the future, we fight for the land. With hearts full of fire, we make our stand. They can't break our spirits, they can't make us fall. In the name of Muguland, we answer the call. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbound, unbroken by the lights. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. We are the anger, we are the flame. For the love of Muguland, we'll fight in her name. With unyielding hearts, we'll carry the fight. In the dark of corruption, we'll be the light. Reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, 'cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't be tamed. For Muguland's freedom, our fire's inflamed. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lights. With not the brave. No chains can hold us, no power can